Okay, good evening, everybody. Hello. All right, I'm going to try this one more time. That worked. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's crowded in here. I'd like it to stay this way every lecture all the way through to the end of the semester, no matter what's on your desk up in studio. Welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. This is the first lecture of the 24-25 academic year at the Yale School of Architecture, and it is really wonderful to have so many people with us for this exciting event, where Issa Diabaté, who is this year's Edward P. Bass Distinguished Visiting Architecture Fellow, will be speaking to us for the kickoff lecture for the semester. The Bass Fellowship was made possible by a generous endowed gift from Ed Bass, a 1968 graduate of Yale College and a member of the class of 1972 of the Yale School of Architecture. Ed Bass was also a member of the Yale Corporation, and he has continued his involvement at the university, taking on stewardship responsibilities for the university's extraordinary collection of buildings and in helping the university move new ones forward. Since his graduation from Yale, Ed has concentrated his professional life on two important issues in today's discourse: the environment and the city. As a developer, he is responsible for the revitalization of the once moribund core of Fort Worth, Texas. And his visionary work on environmental issues is decades long and includes support of the School of Architecture, as just cited, and in many, many other ways. All of you who went to Rome this summer, thank Ed. And at the Peabody Museum, which I hope you go see its new addition and reinstallation of all the exhibitions. It is absolutely extraordinary. The Bass Fellowship enables the school to pair an innovative developer with an architect to offer an advanced studio. Such pairings make possible the kind of exchange between sophisticated architects and equally sophisticated clients that can make for exciting architectural projects in the studio, just as it can do, if perhaps not often enough, in real life. This is the 19th year of the Bass Studios. Former ones include London-based developer Sir Stuart Lipton, teaching with Richard Rogers, the Brazilian developer Rafael Berman, teaching with Sunil Bald, and Los Angeles Dodgers Senior Vice President for Planning, Janet Marie Smith, who taught with Alan Plattis and Andre Harwell. All of the Bass Studios have been unique and extraordinary, and I don't really think there's any other school of architecture that has anything quite like it in their studio offerings. So it really gives me great pleasure to add Issa Diabaté to the list of distinguished Bass Fellows. Issa Diabaté is the managing director at Koffi Diabaté Architectes, a design, planning, and development firm based in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire. He earned his bachelor's degree in finance and business administration from George Washington University and his master of architecture from Yale. His practice, founded 23 years ago with the architect Guillaume Koffi, has won numerous design awards and has had their work included in major international exhibitions, including the 2023 Venice Biennale, an exhibition of African architecture at the Louisiana Museum in Denmark, and the Triennale in Milan. The practice has completed more than 90 projects in West Africa. All of their work is sensitive to local climatic conditions and construction methodologies. They use very little air conditioning and rely on cross ventilation, as well as they create lots of outdoor living spaces that are truly living spaces, not just in name only. But why is he here as the Bass Fellow? I'm going to quote the FT. Koffi and Diabaté have shifted from architects to developers. The change has been motivated in part by their ambitions to control all aspects of their work, as well as their desire to tackle the issues inherent in African urbanism. And as such, as developers, they are doing residential buildings, mixed-use projects, and social housing. I think architects should think as conductors, Diabaté says. We're specialists of nothing, but we need to know about everything, from sociology to culture to aesthetics to technique to engineering to teaching to drawing to counseling, all those things. We have to have little bits of knowledge about all those things because what we're actually doing is trying to bring all of that together and make it sound good as a one. So on that note, so to speak, the conductor, developer, and architect, please join me in welcoming Issa Diabaté.
Good evening, everybody. It's with great pleasure that I'm here in Hastings after almost 30 years now, on the other side. And I would like to tonight share with you what has been our journey over the past 30 years. As many of you know, I moved back to Ivory Coast right after graduation. And most of my career has been in Ivory Coast. And actually, that has created a kind of very interesting approach to architecture that I didn't know when I was leaving school, but that has been sort of been building over the years through the projects and through our experience in West Africa. So I like to think of it as the ability to take prerogative, as architects, and to pretty much dive into subjects that we're not necessarily trained for, at least formally, but conceptually, yes. So, like Deborah said, I work with a partner. His name is Guillaume Koffi. We've been collaborating since '95, since I left school. First started as an intern, then employee, and we partnered in 2001. And it's been a great journey because actually, the two of us think of architecture as something that is not specifically technical, but something that has to do with pretty much everything that we deal in with life. We manage, we take the role of artist. We sometimes are counselors, we control spending, we coordinate, we do landscaping, we document, we teach, we speak. We do urbanism, we sell, we do all those things, but we do all those things with the mind of an architect, which actually makes a difference. So I will talk a little bit about the context in which I work, which is West Africa, tropical Africa, in the tropics. So with pretty high humidity next to the equator, and that actually sets up an environment that is very specific to that will actually make architecture very specific to the place it is from. The first thing that we look at is cross-ventilation. In tropical human spaces, we shy away from insulation and rather push for cross-ventilation. Cross-ventilation from the roof, but also from the main spaces, as actually creating double roofs allows insulation actually from the top, from the sun. Tropical climate is also very rainy, so we also have to protect ourselves from the rain, or at least manage it so that it's not a major hindrance, and mainly protect the openings from direct water, but also from the sun as well. So these are very simple principles that we can apply to architecture to make it sound in a tropical environment. You will notice that the use of vegetation is important, as it cools down spaces and creates microclimates, and pretty much avoids overuse of energy in cooling down spaces. And of course, the water and the sun can work together in order to create a breeze and kind of improve the inside temperature. So we've been very lucky enough to work in a place that is called Assini Mafia, which we've treated as our laboratory, as a space that is rather informal, away from the city, with not much constraints with regards to codes, and that for us was an opportunity to maybe test some of those principles on a pretty much one scale possibility. So what you see here is the configuration of that space. The main asset of this space is it has both ocean that you can see in the background and lagoon in the front ground. And that creates kind of interesting environment that is pushing for tropical building. And looking at what was built before, one thing to notice is that most of the buildings that are built in that area will not use walls that are completely sealed. As you can see on that picture, it's a bunch of sticks, joined together that actually create a wall. That's because even though the environment is closed, it has to allow for cross-ventilation. So when you have sticks next to each other, there's still space for air to go through and never accumulate humidity inside. So these are things that we pretty much kind of learned from, and this is one of the first projects we did in Assini, which is at the church for the community of Assini, which was an interesting project because not only in terms of architecture it gave us the possibility to explore, but also on a very social level, this was a project that was donated by the community and the collection of material, money, architecture from people who actually dwell in that environment to pretty much produce a church that benefits everybody. Here, the main feature of the church actually is cross ventilation. When you take the air from below and sort of push it, through the upper openings, then creating an airflow and quite comfortable ventilated space during the day. And those principles we've also applied to many houses, and we tend to think that we're pushing for a typology of building in those spaces, mainly through the use of double roofs, overhangs, pretty big overhangs to cover terraces and protect them from the rain, protect them from the sun, and use a body of water also to create evaporation that will actually improve the temperature inside. You can see that most of the spaces are cross-ventilated, you open on one side, open on the other, and create airflow. Which is actually what you want in those kind of spaces. Here you can see how the air goes not only above but below. The particularity of creating a double roof is that when the sun hits the main roof, the heat that is generated is just evacuated through the airflow. So you can lose 2-3 degrees from inside to outside. And doing so, we try to create a contemporary architecture, with pretty much character that talks to the principles that I was talking about earlier inside. And also very important to know is in those type of spaces, lifestyle dictates pretty much the type of housing that you're doing. Here, for instance, you can clearly see that the spaces have to be open on both sides to create airflow. So the main spaces actually become just a shed. And it doesn't make sense in those spaces to use maybe insulation because it would go against the lifestyle and you would have to pretty much be inside or outside and open doors to move from in and out when these happen in a very fluid manner. We experimented also with Remdurf in a place that is not necessarily conducive to using earth, but just because we wanted to experiment. And it turned out that it's much more of an aesthetic approach than an ecological approach. And because in the end, they end up costing more than the regular materials. Interesting to also explore. And using that typology, we try to maybe push it in different directions. Here you can see it in wood, where we try to actually create this entire house in 2.5 weeks using local wood. Very simple plan, open on both sides, all space cross-ventilated. Use of louvers, very cheap material in my part of the world. And using those materials also helps us create a language in terms of architecture. So we pretty much have buildings that are quite contemporary, but yet very much linked to the space they're from in terms of materials, in terms of typology, in terms of plans and the way people actually live in the house and dwell in the house. You will notice that a lot of the spaces are both inside and outside. As long as you're covered, you're fine. A few images. So for us, the link of the building to its environment is very important. As you can see here, also local materials can be used in order to talk about that transparency and porosity that we need to have in buildings in that part of the world. More images. And you probably noticed that we tend to use a lot of trees and greenery to improve on that and also to complement the architecture. A few images. But having learned a lot of things in Acidi Mafia from the climate and from playing with houses where we did take a few risks but didn't matter much because this is a sort of secondary place for people. We have then tried to bring those principles in a more formal architecture. And I will share with you this project that we did in 2018 and won Best Sports Building at the World Architecture Festival in 2018, which is a gymnasium in a tropical environment where most of what we try to do is replicate the systems that we'd learned from in the previous examples. And as you see here, this is a gymnasium in two parts. Bottom part with smaller rooms, very simple concrete structure. And on top of that, a steel structure with an overhang roof that protects us from the elements, as you can see here. Section of the building. Here we have a 6-meter overhang on all parts of the building to avoid rain to go inside because the walls are completely porous. To also block the sun when in dry season it's pretty hot, and also use the same principles of airflow to create pretty pleasant temperature inside. And what we've used for the skin is a perforated metal sheeting, which allows air to go through and actually allows full transparency, which actually when you're inside, you completely feel like you're outside, even though the building has a certain presence. A few images of the inside spaces. Here you can see the spaces below where the walls are not reaching the ceiling just to improve on the airflow, and all the walls are porous using perforated metal. The materials are very basic. We're also in a part of the world where economy of means is important, so we try to stick to the basics. Structure, very simple. Steel structure holding the skin. And we like the kind of contrast between inside and outside. When you're outside, you see the red mass of the building, but when you're inside, it's completely transparent. Another building, which we also won a prize for at the World Architecture Festival in 2021, sorry, it says 2023, it's 2021, which is the Orange Village. In this case, we're in a more formal office building, for Orange, which is a telecom company. And the goal here was to pretty much bring some of those principles also inside the building, using a second skin to protect from the sun, but also creating this atrium in the middle that could allow also for cross ventilation from the outside of the building to the atrium, as you can see here. We also use green trees to create a microclimate. It takes time to grow, but still it's working. And as you can see here, structural elements of the building, which is a very basic cylinder with a second skin that mimics the skin of a golf ball, just because we're right across the Gulf of Abidjan. And for us, it was important to make that connection. This is a principle of the second skin, very basic, steel structure holding a Korean shell. to create this sort of golf ball feel. You can see here the building from above, the atrium in the center, and the intention to bring a lot of green. I mean, the parking is a little dry now, but we've many planters, and probably in a few years from now, it's going to be all covered. A few images of the atrium, where you can see the Gulf of Abidjan in the background. We use a lot of planters as well to protect the windows from direct sun, and it's quite pleasant to have a vegetation outside of the window. Views from the inside, entry, office space, and entry to the building. Another project I'm going to share with you, which is also nominated at the World Architecture Festival, is slightly different. We're moving now from the office typology to cultural typologies, where we have to deal with issues other than just basic functions. But in this case, talking about voodoo, I guess most of you have heard about what voodoo is, but very few of us knew exactly what voodoo was. And dealing with that project pushed us in the understanding of what voodoo is. Before, like many of us, we all thought that voodoo was this sort of mystical juju thing that would happen in the back of dark houses, but turned out to be actually a full-fledged religion. This illustrates actually what voodoo is in the imaginary of people. But actually, voodoo culture originated in West Africa and traveled to the Americas, where it's probably flourished more than actually in West Africa. And going through that process of understanding what voodoo is, we learned that there are voodoos all over the place. And actually, there are voodoos in Louisiana as a religion. So it was interesting to see how something that could originate from West Africa had traveled to the Americas and had actually blossomed in the Americas and is actually coming back now as a cultural reference to West Africans. Images of voodoo in Haiti and Benin. This is what you get when you type voodoo on Google. But actually, it's quite a fascinating religion. I had a chance to read a little bit about it, and as all religious and spiritual systems, they all converge in the same direction. It's about what you do and what is your print on life when you leave it, and how much good you've done. To summarize it, it's very sophisticated, but just a few words on that. And this museum is in Porto Novo. Porto Novo is the capital of Benin and is actually the siege of voodoo religion. Voodoo is very common in Benin and practiced openly. And initially, we were very uneasy about doing this project because we're not practitioners, but we were quickly told that we're not doing a sanctuary for voodoo and just a museum. To actually make the culture of voodoo known to the people so that people could actually engage and understand what voodoo is, as opposed to having this sort of imaginary idea of what voodoo is. So we had a site that was quite interesting because we had some colonial buildings and some very emblematic buildings, including the Cathedral of Cotonou, which is sitting right across the Museum of Voodoo, which for some people was maybe a contradiction, but in the end, I think they do complement each other. And some existing colonial structures, museum, on the site that we had to keep. So our main inspiration for designing this building was what is called the Tata Samba. Tata Samba is a type of, it's a typology of building that happens in Benin, where you have the rooms in circles that are linked by a residual space. So you have the space that is enclosed, and the other space, which is the living space, that is very much outside. Second inspiration is the voodoo divination calabash. Those calabashes used for divination by voodoo priests. They can predict the future and talk about where you come from and where you're going. So a few sketches on how to install those rooms, how to install the program on the site. So we decided to put each exhibition room as a calabash on the site and pretty much create a flow, from the parking space, which is on the other side, through the garden, as you can see if you follow the blue line, and inside the building, going from one calabash to the next, and using the residual space as circulation space, as you can probably see here a little better. In section, the site is sloping, so we thought it was an opportunity to also, create movement and have somewhat of a dance of the calabashes, and have a program for each round room, including entry space and exhibition spaces in the room. And here are a few images of what it looks like from the outside. The outer shell is cladding made out of terracotta, which allows the skin of the building to be ventilated and therefore lose a few degrees inside and not stress as much the air conditioning. What's interesting in the two typologies I just showed is you also find the limit with those typologies, to the systems I was talking about earlier. Museum will need to control the air and control humidity, and would not allow us to create a fully ventilated space. But we still are relying on cultural elements, and as you can see here, a Dora Voodoo temple that we are also bringing to the museum as a reference. Cohabitation between existing colonial buildings and actually an image of the building in its environment. Some inside spaces. This is called the legba. The legba is is the protector of the entry. So this is sitting in the hall. So, having gone through that, I would like to now focus on how we came to development and why we are developers in the end. Because we started as architects, and if I told you at the beginning of my career that I knew we'd become developers, it would probably be a big lie. Actually, while in school, I tended to shy away from everything that had to do with urban planning and development. But in the end, also the nature of the architecture that we do and the place where we practice sort of pushed us in that direction. And again, I think that context is important. Local context has pretty much framed the way we do architecture now. It has informed what the prerogatives of the architects should be. Of course, being an environment where things are formal, it's a lot easier. I mean, you don't necessarily have to think about issues that pertain to urban growth, to exponential growth of population, of mobility, of infrastructure. And of course, being an environment where you're supposed to be in a development process, in which you sort of create the model that is best for you, it is very important to ask yourself those questions. So we live and work in Abidjan. Abidjan is is a city that has grown from 1.2 million to almost 7 million today. And it is still growing at the same rate. And in that context, it's very difficult to just go after one project after the other, when you know that actually what will structure the city is working on bigger plots and actually designing beyond the single building. So you can see an image of Abidjan in the 60s when planning was sound, and an image of Abidjan in 2016 when that growth has taken over and has not allowed the government to pretty much follow the process. This is how the cities actually do evolve. As you can see, a lot of densification, very little green, and pressure, from the informal to sort of eat up the formal. A lot of neighborhoods actually are created after people move. The need to create housing, make people move in areas where there are no roads, and then the roads have to follow to connect them. And one thing we wanted to avoid is this. This is the model in a lot of African cities and a lot of cities in general, where you build one house after the other. You cut down all the trees and you create, heat islands, and with no care for what the inhabitants of those places, will have to deal with. You come back a few years down the line and you will notice that a lot of the houses have disappeared and buildings have risen, 2, 3, 4-story buildings, just because there's a need for housing, and one plot that can house 10 families, will not resist that pressure. So we started this first program as initial developers. We certainly did not have the financial power to go beyond a small plot. And of course, when you start with small plots, you have to start with the higher end. That's the easier way to actually prove that you can do what you want to do. And we sort of went to this neighborhood that usually has, I would say, one house on 1,000 square meters. We decided to put 32 units on 11,000 square meters, just to prove that it was possible to densify. But we wanted to densify first for the high end, because we were very conscious that the process of emulation is very important in our environment. And if you start densifying where people have the least means, it would be perceived as something of a lesser quality. So for us, it was important to densify for the high end first. So we created, we used this plot to, I'm going to come back to this, to pretty much put 14 houses and 18 apartments. And one thing we didn't want was to have cars running around. So one thing we did is created an underground parking space that was linked to all the units and claimed that upper space as communal space, which worked quite well. And we were very lucky to sell all the units before we finished, because also of the way we approached development. We didn't want to, as classic developers, put out, handouts and websites about what we were doing. But we crafted a little strategy where we were inviting people to have a 45 to an hour meeting with us and talk about the project, explain the project, explain why we wanted to do it that way, why we wanted as much green, why we wanted ventilated space, including the parkings, why we felt it was very important to bring trees and create a microclimate, and also why it was important to move from plots that were 1,000 square meters to plots that were about 400 in terms of maintenance, in terms of costs, pertaining to energy, pertaining to maintaining the garden, to the pools, to the security. And made clients realize that once you mutualize everything and divide it by 32, you're just paying a fraction of what you used to pay. And one other thing for the clients was, well, if we want to, how much square meters are we getting on a plot? And say, we're not selling square meters, we're selling a lifestyle. And that resonated in their mind, and this is how we were able to make people transition from much bigger housing units to something more compact, and actually where their life has improved. So we sort of crafted this motto: living differently, living together, for preserving the privacy and. Together to avoid waste of space, contemporary and harmony of our times, living collectively to share, living higher to stop urban sprawl, living sustainable to save energy, living green to preserve the planet. And these are words that we've put all around the development so that everybody who walks in there understands why we have trees, why we have this communal space upstairs that now the tenants and owners use monthly to do their monthly drink. Why we thought it was so important for them to not be isolated, but to feel as a community, and it's worked pretty well. I mean, this is something that actually has opened our eyes on the possibilities, as architects, to reshape the way people live, just using architecture. Some inside spaces. And this went pretty well and sort of gave us appetite for something bigger, especially in a city where 32 units is not going to do anything, when you need 50 to 100,000 units a year. And also working in the high end is not going to resolve the problem of housing and its shortage. So we decided to take on a slightly more ambitious project, which is Abata Village, where we're developing now 226 units. We have the same DNA, except that now that we have 226, we can introduce office space, we can introduce retail, we can play with waste management, we can recycle, we can do a lot of other things that we couldn't do on 32 units. And also, we have a variety of units which will induce a different type of people, different backgrounds. Here we aim to have more diverse background people, probably less on the higher end, but in more young people mixing with other generations. And something that is important to us is having a mix in terms of building typologies, but also in terms of population and age population. So this is in a village on the periphery of Abidjan. Village used to be a village, but with time, the village is becoming the city. And this is something that you see happening in a lot of African cities, especially in West Africa, where all the initial villages are being eaten by the city, but not necessarily in the best way. So it's important to also maybe start from the village to move on to something that makes more sense. So we created this thing that functions a little bit like a village, where we have a communal space accessible to everybody, including the lagoon, and sort of sub-communal spaces that are by island, where you can have a different level of privacy if you don't necessarily want to be engaging in the rest of the community. And try to minimize the amount of hard road by using green, where you can actually circulate. And always keep the principles of cross-ventilations in your apartments. Introducing office space. And this is actually being built right now, and hopefully within the next 2 years it'll be finished. So these were the first two development projects that gave us the drive to go to the next step, what we call the future. because we also realized that even 226 units is not going to do much of a difference, because it's when you need 100,000 units in a city, you need to think differently. And we sort of decided a few years ago to imagine what the future African city could be in terms of DNA, not just in terms of physical structure, but where should we start to reflect on the city, and how should we compose the city? And on one occasion, the Goethe Institute sort of asked us to think about those issues initially, because they wanted to interrogate the presence of animal life in urban settings. But in the end, we thought that animal life in urban settings, when you sort of bring that to an African city, doesn't mean much. And we felt it was important to maybe rethink the city from the beginning and use that opportunity to, if we had to set up a DNA for a new city, for a new environment, what could it be? And I will share with you a couple of videos that are pretty much talking about what this. Sorry about that. I'm trying to find both. Thank you. Which one is first? Just playing that way. Oh, the video, the first video. No, it is. I think it's this one. You can just read as it plays. So that's the first video, and from that first video, we tried to make it more concrete. And of course, this project that we will be working on this fall, which is called EBRA, is actually testing what we have established on a conceptual level and try to push it in something that is real and that becomes pretty much ground for us to explore. And The project of Devrouax, we started to work on it about 6-7 years ago, with the main challenge being that Ebra is a village on the lagoon, being actually reached by the city, and the city is about to swallow it. The model is villagers have land, and they usually sell the land when the land becomes attractive to the city. So when they do so, they're enabled to actually keep the village and create sound development. And we felt it was important that we should apply that type of thinking to a real situation. And I will share with you now the final video of what we had the chance to present at the 2023 Biennale in Venice.
The IBRA project aims to anticipate the phenomenon of exponential urban growth that we are experiencing today in major cities. This anticipation strategy aims to avoid the informal expansion of cities that neither respect their inhabitants nor the surrounding nature. Despite its proximity to major hubs in Ivory Coast, such as the nation's economic capital of Abidjan, the inhabitants of Ibra maintain a strong sense of belonging to the village. This is due to the village's governance system, which revolves around a chiefdom coordinating civic life, as well as the village's human scale. As part of a citizen consultation, the local governance, with the support of the public authorities, defined a development vision for the locality of Ebra. Their vision is based on the notion of mutualization of lands and wealth. The future city will be built on a human scale in order to preserve the sense of belonging of its inhabitants and to promote soft mobility, an approach anchored in the notion of an invitation to live differently. The old village is preserved and integrated into the new city. It is made up of multiple urban cells with their own centrality, as opposed to concentric cities that sprawl around a single urban center. The project's administrative center will be added to the local governance system. In connection with the chieftaincy, a town hall, a prefecture, a police station, and a fire station will be established. Health and education services, as well as commercial spaces, innovation centers, and experimental hubs will be integrated in the project. Different types of housing will be developed to promote social and functional mixity. Cultural and leisure structures will support the city's tourism activity. They will aim to foster economic development with an emphasis on the local youth demographic. Community gardens and agricultural areas will be established within the city for the benefit of local populations. In connection with the urbanization strategy, thermoregulating green spaces will be integrated throughout the various core centers of the village in accordance with local beliefs. Sacred forests will be preserved. In an effort to reduce carbon emissions, the Ibra project promotes soft mobility through walking, cycling, and the use of green vehicles. The Ebra Model City project aims to create a dynamic of emulation. The long-term vision is to deploy this new city model at a regional, national, and international scale. Each city in the network will adapt a specialty to meet a global need, such as specialized hospitals, universities, or industries. Ebra represents a territory, a vision, a community of people, and a common project for a new model of life and city. At the center of each region, natural reserve areas will be designed. They will serve as regulating barriers to urban sprawl. Ultimately, the goal will be to deploy this new city model on a scale that matches population growth to ensure virtuous and sustainable development.
Thank you very much.
So Issa said he'd be happy to answer a few questions. Wait one sec, please. Raise your hand if you have a question, and a microphone will come to you. As long as you're ready. I see your hand. So microphone on its way over here. Hand up.
Well, thank you so much for the lovely presentation of your works. I'm very taken by a term that you used earlier and kind of repeated throughout your presentation on the kind of practice of emulation. And of course, when you talked about the initial development of the research project from the high end and kind of wanting to see it trickle and kind of echo through, other demographics. I'm really curious about that with respect to actually the material ecology and economy of your projects, because I think in the early projects, there was great emphasis on local materials. There was a kind of establishment of a spatial vocabulary that seems more in line with the local architectural design, vernacular designs. But, as the kind of scale of the project, became magnified or grew larger, I think we start to see maybe a receding of that material economy and that kind of sensitivity. And I'm really curious about how then do you straddle that, particular in this kind of master planning situation where your project would scale all the way up. Where's the concrete coming from? Where's the wood coming from? That's maybe just some initial questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question, actually, and you can clearly see that once you change the scale, you also change the systems. Because what is lacking is the possibility to scale up with the systems that you initially use. So why is there such a problem? Because we're also in a world where you have industries dominating materials. And if you want to use alternatives, you at least need to have a certain scale to do so. So, which is why for us it's interesting to move on to the third project, where we can actually create the appetite for alternative industries to accompany us. Right now, it's completely impossible to do sort of respond to the kind of pressure we have in terms of population and growth of the city with traditional alternative materials. But we need industries to fill up the gap. And if we have projects or a program that deals with not 2, 3, but thousands of units, then you can create the appetite for industries to actually kind of explore those routes.
Hi. In your transition from architect to architect developer, what were the skills or the mentality that was easily translatable versus what were the things that were surprising, tough about this shift or hybrid role that you had?
Actually, it went pretty smoothly. I mean, the toughest part was probably the finances, but it went pretty smoothly because we sort of changed the way we designed. I mean, not changed it, but we composed it differently. You know, when you're designing a house, you think in terms of materials, in terms of room, in terms of spatial composition. When you think about development, you think about the people, the culture, the means, how much money it's going to cost, how you're going to finance it, and how you're going to sell. And these are, you know, they may seem quite trivial, but they're quite interesting to when you dive into it and you take them as constraints, you know, like you would take the constraint of sight and try to integrate them into the thinking. You know, one of the first things was, you know, how much those units are going to cost, and are people able to buy those units, and who are the people who are going to buy those units. So even in terms of commercial strategy, we did not want to delegate that to someone else. We're like, if we're doing development, we're going to test every layer of development, you know, from the design all the way to the selling. So, for instance, the first project we were showing, we sort of decided that we didn't want certain type of population in that environment. Politicians, football players, and people who have a lot of money, who can afford, but who will have a lifestyle that will disrupt what we're trying to create. So it was important for us to sort of bring in the clients, tell them everything from the design intentions all the way to the price of the unit. And also make them feel at ease because it was not a public information. And actually, what happened is that most of the people who went to that first presentation, just made us sell the entire project through word of mouth. So for us, it was also interesting to see that even in the way we were selling, we could also have an impact or change the way things usually happen.
Could you talk? I seem to have killed that mic. So going from that very first project, the early project, the church, where the community is coming and bringing all these materials together, to these larger developments where you still talk about the role that the specific politics of the location are embedded or have a strong relationship with the architecture. Can you talk more about the role of community engagement as you've gone between scales and between projects in some of your methodologies for that?
Yeah. A very important question. I don't think we would have been able to do the other projects if we never engaged with the community in the first place. And actually, I could write a whole book on community interaction. One thing that is very important is that you could never do a project like that if you do not have personal engagement in that community. If people don't know you, they will not necessarily listen to what you have to say or follow what you, or even engage in conversation with you. Doing the church was a very interesting project because there was a need for a church, but no means. So going, from door to door to ask people, can you contribute to the church was quite an interesting process. Those who give, those who don't, those who are suspicious. So you also have to build trust in order to engage in community projects. I've shown a few projects, in the early part of the presentation, but these are ways for us to constantly engage with communities because we still do projects of that scale in that neighborhood, in that place, but also in others. And in the process have also made people aware that you could try different typologies, just relying on local means of construction, local materials, and even more important, local lifestyle. Like the openness is something that you could not do in any geography. The inside-outside lifestyle is something that is very cultural. So for us, it was a good example of how we could incorporate all of those constraints and turn them into contemporary architecture. So yeah, community is always key. We often say that for us, sociology is one of the first things that you have to master as an architect because you have to know who you're building for.
Questions? Way back over there.
Oh, hey. First of all, thank you for your lecture. I really enjoyed it. I want to ask a question about how you imagine the future. I see a lot of parallels between, I guess, your imaginations of these cities and the new town movements in the UK. And often the struggles with the issues they're facing now is very specific imaginations of what the future looked like, who the future should serve, and then you now have communities with buildings that don't work for them. And I guess my question to you is, how are you imagining the future, the tropical West African city, in a context, and how it's affecting your designs for these future spaces?
Well, I guess my role is to sort of create the framework. The future has to be imagined by people who will live in the future, which means a generation that I'm now past. So we like to be very porous in our thinking, and we like to listen a lot to what new generations have to say. And actually, in my lifetime, I went from graduating here, doing everything by hand, to now a pool of people in the office that can't hold a pencil, and and for them, it's also very important that the future looks like them, like. People in my generation would certainly put the car not in the center, but in a very important place, which is completely different now. My younger employees are much more in tune with, go into a neighborhood and being able to not have to engage with a car transportation, and trying to bypass all the systems that are framing our lives today. And of course, I can have ideas, I can understand the intention, but in a practical way, I don't feel in a space where I can actually, provide a solution that is set in stone. But on the other end, our role is to provide the space for all of that thinking, all of that interrogation, to sort of arise and maybe frame the thinking so they actually easily reach maybe a picture of what they think the future should be.
We have time for one more.
Thank you so much for your talk. I think my question is, so your final model, it's, for me, you kind of illustrated this proliferation of these kind of urban nodes that are then connected by, it could be highways, whatever. I guess my question is, you spoke about them being kind of buffer via green space. I'm just wondering, is there any thoughts of like how could those spaces also, I guess, develop or start to be in more dialogue with those nodes?
Well, the idea is not to develop those spaces. It's just to implant urban spaces outside of those spaces and let nature, play its role. I live in a country with 14 natural reserves, and quite lucky, when you go and visit those reserves, the last thing you want to do is actually intervene. But on the other end, you want to make sure that such spaces, keep being preserved and probably reinforced by just the fact that you contain where you expand. So, the natural spaces, to me, I think we have to let nature play its role and sort of be very, parsimonious with the type of space that we occupy. Which is why, for me, densification is something very important. The more dense we live, the more green space we have collectively.
Those perhaps are wonderful closing words. The more dense we live,